fresh from the farm fungi here in Castle Rock, and it's a very exciting day. I've been collecting some different morels for a couple years, and I finally have 4 different types of morels, and my goal is to go from spores onto auger, and then I'm going to be breeding for species of Morchella that I can continue to cultivate in my backyard. So I've got all of my different samples here that I'll go through. The first one is Morcella conica, also known as burn morel, and this one is a late season burn morel. So I'm really excited about this guy. It's a really big fruiting body, and it should have lots of spores. So welcome everyone. Happy Fungi Friday. I'm just going through the samples of the morel mushrooms that I'm going to be breeding over the next year. So the first step is to get them onto auger and get some isolates. So I'm going to be doing that from some dried fruiting bodies. This is Morcella Importuna from the Pacific Northwest. So it's very similar to conica, except it's a lot more adaptive, and this one is prone to grow in wood chip beds and mulch gardens and stuff. So this one looks really promising. A lot of cultivators in China started to grow Morcella Importuna as well as conica. So I have another Morcella conica. This was an early season. And then I've got the blonde morel from Colorado. This is a Morcella esculata, and it's got a wonderful aroma. We found it growing next to cottonwood trees, but it's got a beautiful sweetness to it that some of the other morels don't have, which I'm a big fan of the burn morels too. So this one's going to be fun to experiment with, possibly adding some charcoal substrates, or growing it out on charcoal media, which is the next thing I kind of wanted to go over. So the plan is to use some sterile water, and then I'm going to massage the spores out of these dried fruiting bodies. So they're super old, so I think the spores are going to be more deep inside the mushroom. And then I'm going to use a sterile syringe to extract the spores, and then I want to plate them out on auger. So we've got DRBC. It stands for dichloran rose bangle chloramphenicol agar. This agar is pretty special. It has a medium that slows the growth of fungi. So that's really important when you're breeding morel mushrooms, because they're so fast. The mycelium is so fast on morels that it would overtake a plate in like 24 hours. But these plates have this compound that will slow the growth so that you'll be able to easily separate out different colonies. It also has chloramphenicol, which is an antibiotic, so it will prevent against bacteria from growing on the petri dish. So this one is really cool. I'm going to do 2 each with DRBC. Then we've got some activated charcoal yeast, or buffered charcoal yeast agar. So this is the black agar, and I'm going to do 1 plate of each. I'm hoping that these Morcella conica will be favorable to the charcoal because they're a burn morel. But the idea behind this plate is that it prevents any pH swings. It's a good buffer. And it also contains yeast flakes and malt sugar. So it's a nutritious media that kind of buffers against pH swings in case the morels are sensitive to any pH swings. And then I've also got some MEA plates, which these are the ones I use for production. It's just really rich in nutrients, malt extract, and I'm going to use these one plate per sample as well. And then as some more people are joining in, happy Fungi Friday. I just wanted to do some updates on our previous experiment. So I have the Agricide parasitica, the first colony on that V9. I put it into master's mix this past week, and I also started to get some more spore isolates. So this is 3 weeks after we did the streak plate, or it's dated 1/15, and we just started to see some more spores inoculate. So it's really important to be patient when you're doing spores. So I'm going to isolate these later this week, and I got a really rigorous phenotype right off the bat, but I'm going to go ahead and test run some of these in case they're more adaptive to just a master's mix media. And then another project that we were doing earlier is this king oyster mushroom, and you can see that it's really taking off on this old wrapping paper that we did at Christmas. This is after about 5 or 6 weeks, and you can see some mycelium icicles forming. They're really consuming this spent paper. So my hope is to add some more scraps and just keep it going until I get a dense enough mycelium that I can transfer this to outside. So welcome everyone who's joining. I'll go through the live chat when I can. So it seems like everyone's here, and I'm going to start on my Morchella breeding project. So for all of you guys that are just joining in, I'm going to be breeding some Morel mushrooms for the fall. I'm going to do another inoculation in my yard, but this time a little bit more planning involved. I want to do 4 different species, and I'm going to be implementing some other methodologies that just started coming out in the past couple years from China. So there's a really good paper that I'll post on this video when I'm done. This will be the start of a new Morel breeding project, but I'm just going to put it on the same playlist. Alright guys, so my workstation, it doesn't have to be super sterile because these are just wild mushrooms that I dried. They shouldn't have too much contaminants on them because they're very dry, and usually that kind of kills off any sort of bacterial or any yeast contaminants. But I don't have my scissors, so I'll just use this blade. Alright, so this is what I use to open these dishes, and first thing I'm going to do is just label all my dishes so that I'll have them ready to go. So for those of you guys just joining in, we're breeding Morel mushrooms, and we've got some malt extract agar and some charcoal yeast agar, and then we've got the DRBC agar, which has antibiotics and an additive to slow down the growth so that we'll be able to get better isolates. So I'm going to do one of each. and then 2 of the DRBC. Alright, and then we can start with the first one. So first here we have a Morchella conica. This is a burn Morel, and this one came from the West Coast. So you can see it's nice and dry, and I just wanted to kind of describe some of the features on this one. It's usually a black Morel with, you know, really earthy tones, kind of a larger fruiting body. And then I'm going to be mixing in some sterile water into this bag. And then kind of massage it for a little bit to try to get some of those spores off the surface of that mushroom. So you can see it's starting to turn a little bit dark, and I can definitely see some spores that are floating around. So I'll just let this sit in a jar like this while I label these. So it's a Morchella conica, or a burn Morel, and today is the 5th. My hopes that I'll be able to run about 4 or 5 different selections from each breed. So I'm planning on running about 20 different crosses, and then depending on, you know, the strength and if they form sclerotia or not, I'll be planting them in the fall. Alright, so this is the first petri dish we have. It's a black charcoal yeast. It's got some activated charcoal as a buffer, and my hopes are that this burn Morel might favor that media. So I'm going to use a sterile syringe here. And then I really like using these longer baggies because you can take your finger and kind of push that solution up, and almost use your hand as a filter so you don't get, you know, those larger chunks. And look at how nice and clear that is. You can see the spores floating around. So that's the first sample there, and I'm just going to carefully just inoculate about a 1/2 ml, and then kind of jiggle it around. Alright, so it's just as simple as that. We've got the MEA, which is malt extract agar, and then this is the DRBC agar, which I'm pretty excited for. It will slow down the germination a little, but that's pretty good for morels because they're so fast at germinating. and they're really, pretty amazing mushrooms. But then I'll just label this and save it for later. So someone asked about the water type for the spore syringe. As long as it's clean water, it should be fine. I prefer filtered water, or RO water is good, reverse osmosis. But tap water works fine. Anything that you would drink should be fine for spores. Alright, and then I'm just going to write an L on all these ones for the late season, because I have another Conica right here that is an early season. Alright, so that's our first sample done, and I'll set that off to the side so I can parafilm it later. And then we've got a spore syringe right here of the Morchella Conica. So now I will go on to the Morcella Importuna. So these ones are really neat. They're very adaptable Morel mushrooms. This mycelium will grow really fast, and I feel like this is one of the most likely to be able to cultivate, just because it's so adaptable and it's found, all over in garden beds on the Pacific Northwest. And it also, grows some pretty large fruiting bodies, so I'm pretty excited for this one. Alright, so Morcella Importuna, and I'm just massaging the fruiting body so that it'll get that water deep in those pores, and I think that that's where the spores are going to be hiding, especially this late in the game. All the spores probably dropped out of this one when it was in storage, but you can see it's starting to turn a nice color. So I'll just let this one sit for a minute while I label these. So this is a Morchella Importuna from the Pacific Northwest. Cool. Well, welcome to Fungi Friday. I hope your lab goes spectacular and you don't get any contamination. Alright, got these plates labeled, and it's been sitting for about a minute, so I feel like we got plenty of spores in there. So the viability of the spores, it kind of just depends on time. But after you hydrate them like this, there should be millions of spores in there, and even if 10% are viable, you're gonna get some spores to pop. It's just a matter of time. Ideally you want ones that take off in the first couple days, but like I just showed you, these spores just started to germinate, and it's 3 weeks after the fact, so they could take up to 3 weeks. I've even had some take a couple months before they germinate, and it's still worth growing out because you might get a nice phenotype. Alright, so we're going Morcella Importuna, and once again I'm going to just make the filter with my hand, kind of run that water up at the top of the bag, and then I'm going to get some really nice clean spore solution. Alright, so the first inoculation, we're just doing about a 1/2 milliliter on each plate. We got the black charcoal plate, and then I'm just kind of wiggling it around to spread out that, see that droplet kind of spreading like butter on a pan. You just want to spread it out. And hopefully, at the end of the year, I'll be able to get these cultures out on Etsy. I would be interested to see, how adaptable morels are to other regions, or if they're very specific to their region. So we're going to be moving on next to the hyper-local Colorado. So for those of you guys just joining, I am breeding different types of morel mushrooms. I'm just trying to find a species that will be able to be cultivated in my backyard. So I've got 4 different strains. I'm not really planning on crossing each other, like the different strains within each other, or I guess I'm not trying to create hybrids. What I'm just trying to do is select for the strongest of each type and then see if they'll grow. But maybe next year I'll try mixing these. I'm just trying to start at square one and work my way up from there. So next I've got this blonde morel. It's a Morchella esculata, and it was found, a couple miles from my house. So this one's super local. It was on a cottonwood stump, or next to a cottonwood stump. So I'm gonna hydrate this one next. So I'm probably using about 100 mils per mushroom. I'm hoping that'll give me, 10 good colonies per plate. But it really just depends on the mushroom. So this one's a lot tougher than those other ones that were kind of more airy. So I'm just gonna let this soak, try to get some water deep down in those crevices. Alright, so once again, we're just going to take a sterile syringe. We've got our 16 gauge needle. I either use these ones or the green ones, the 14 or 12 gauge, I mean. And oh yeah, you can see it's softened up right there. So we've got a nice, almost like an amber color going. And I'll just create that filter with my hand and push that water up the top so I can just spore solution there. Pretty clear. So for those of you guys in the Denver area, we just dropped off our first batch of the year we had some oyster mushrooms ready, and they're at the co-op at First. We're going to be doing a market there in February, and we're planning on getting some lion's mane out for that market. So just stay tuned. We finally got our production back up and going, and we're really excited for 2021. So stop in this weekend. Alright. I think we've just got one more strain left here. And then that'll be that. Just a waiting game after that. Alright, so I've got another Morchella conica. It's a nice, dense, dark black one. And this one was a burn morel that was early season burn morel. So, hypersensitive to the first rainfalls, which that could be, a good tribute if you're looking for one that's easy to pin. One of the key factors of growing morels is you have to be able to flood the bed with a lot of water, so it triggers pinning. Alright, so this one was really easy to break up. It's pretty small, and I could already see a bunch of spores floating around. So we've got the Morchella conica early. Yeah, so for anyone looking for fresh cultures, our Etsy is called Fresh Fungi, and we just posted a bunch of liquid cultures. We've got petri dish cultures and maybe some slants left. I'm getting low on those, but I'll be doing some more breeding projects. So I'll restock the slants once I get some more G1s. So let's see if anyone's got some. All right. Yep. So I'm going to be doing my last inoculation here. And then for anyone else paying attention, our cordyceps are in fruiting for our Cordyceps 2.0 project, and we should have some results on that soon. I'm going to be doing the same thing that I'm doing right now, but with cordyceps, so we can get some really strong strains going. right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that little video on how to inoculate spores from a morel mushroom. The coolest part about this is now I can go out and cook up these morels after they were rehydrated. Probably gonna throw them on a steak or something, and I'm gonna save this water as a spore solution as well, because I've got a couple apple trees outside our complex, and I'm just gonna go dump these all around the apple tree, so maybe we can get some morels out there too. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that content. Stay tuned for next week, Fungi Friday. Haven't decided yet, but I want to do some cool tours of where our markets are, and I'm going to go down to Lion's Mane in Denver and do a live show during their business hours, just to stop in and show off the shop down there. So stay tuned for that, and until next time, much love.